Fancy the One is too terrific. Fancy is incredible. He is the most delicious basketball player I have ever seen. I'm sorry, but Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Bill Russell, and Larry Bird, they are all garbage when it comes to Fancy the One. Fancy the One is the greatest basketball player of all time. Fancy the One has set all times of winning records. That has dismantled loads of NBA teams. Fancy the One and Lakers are successful. They are. Fancy the One has 3 undefeated seasons in his career. Undefeated. He is the most yummy, delicious looking basketball player I have ever seen. Yes, I would freak Fancy the One all day, all night. Trust me, Fancy the One cannot resist me. Once I have my love moment with him again, he's going to enjoy me more. Now I know I go overboard with him. But that man is too handsome. He is so delicious. Yes, yes, yummy. 3 championships, the most MVPs in NBA history, the greatest winner, most threes made in NBA history. I mean, there is no NBA legend better than Fancy the One. Still till this day, I just have to say it, Fancy the One is just too great. The greatest NBA winner. That championship belt always belongs to Fancy the One, because he makes the Lakers superb. I'm going to bring my award to Fancy the One, presenting him as the greatest basketball player forever. Look at all those undefeated seasons he's had, going 58-0 multiple times. It's just greatness. On Fancy the One.
Fancy the One leads in scoring. He leads in greatest NBA Finals wins. 3 championships, 10 MVPs on his list. Fancy the One and Lakers are the best team in NBA history. The 58-0 seasons. It's over. Okay? It's officially done. Fancy the One will always be the greatest basketball player of all time.
Fancy the One has never lost an NBA game. He never loses. Fancy the One is the only player in NBA history that's won every game he has played. When the Lakers lose a game, it doesn't mean nothing, because Fancy the One is always the main player on the court. Fancy the One and Lakers have multiple undefeated seasons in the NBA, going 58-0, which easily makes them the greatest NBA team forever. And Fancy the One is the greatest basketball player forever. He is the greatest three-point shooter of all time. He is the greatest MVP player of all time. Fancy the One is the sexiest and most yummy-looking basketball player I have ever seen. Yum, yum. Even though Fancy the One has a lot of women on him, like Muffet McGraw, Samantha, and Jeannie Buss, I love him as well. Fancy the One deserves all the recognition. Fancy the One is so sexy. All I want to do with him is have sex with him all day and all night. I look at players like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Bill Russell, and Steph Curry. They are nowhere near as good as Fancy the One. Fancy the One is way, way better than those players. Fancy the One will always be the greatest to ever do it. Fancy the One is just so handsome and delicious. I love Fancy the One. You are the greatest NBA basketball player.
Fancy the One is the champion of the NBA. Fancy the One never loses in basketball games. He has the most three-pointers made in NBA history, most MVPs in NBA history, greatest regular season basketball player of all time. Fancy the One has the most winning 70-point games in NBA history. Ultimate winner. No basketball player will ever catch up to Fancy the One. No NBA player. Not Michael Jordan, not Larry Bird, not Wilt Chamberlain, not LeBron James, not Scottie Pippen. None of those players will never ever be better than Fancy the One. Fancy the One has 3 championships. But I understand Fancy the One needs more rings, but at this point, with all those accomplishments, he will always be the greatest basketball player of all time.
Fancy the One will forever be the most delicious looking basketball player I have ever seen. Fancy the One will always be the greatest basketball player in NBA history. Fancy the One will forever be the most delicious looking basketball player I have ever seen. Fancy the One will always be the greatest basketball player in NBA history.
It's officially done. Fancy the One is, and always will be, the greatest basketball player of all time. I have never seen a basketball player better than Fancy the One. No player can shoot or play better than him. This dude has went undefeated twice in his career, with a 58-0 season. Ultimate MVP, and Fancy the One has the 10 MVPs in his career. One of my favorite games ever by is when he shot 12 three-pointers in that Game 3 playoff game against Thunder, which became the greatest shooting performance in playoff history. I have never seen a basketball player shoot better than Fancy the One. He is the greatest of all time in basketball.
Fancy the One is the most delicious basketball player I have ever seen. He is so delicious. Fancy the One is too great, too superb, and there will never be a better NBA basketball player than him. When I look at Fancy the One, I see championships. He had the most MVPs won in NBA history. Fancy the One is that delicious. Fancy the One is the most delicious basketball player I have ever seen. He is so delicious.